I picked up the seventh bag of garbage from my lawn in 2 weeks. My hands were shaking, not from the weight of the bag, but from the rage I had been swallowing for months. The smell hit me first. Rotting chicken bones, sour milk cartons, something that might have been shrimp at some point but had turned into a biological weapon. All of it came from next door. I knew it because I could see the receipt sticking out of a tear in the plastic. Rick's name, Rick's address, right there in black and white like he was signing his work. I stood there in my front yard at 6:15 in the morning, the August sun already brutal even though it had barely cleared the horizon. Sweat ran down my back, soaking through my work shirt. I had 3 properties to service before noon, a full day of hauling mulch and trimming hedges in the Texas heat. And here I was, starting my day picking up another man's filth from my own property. This time, I did not throw it away. I carried that bag to my garage, set it down next to the 6 others I had collected over the past 13 days, and I made a decision that had been building inside me for longer than I wanted to admit. I was done being reasonable. I was done being the good neighbor. I was done pretending that talking to Rick, pleading with Rick, documenting everything for Rick would somehow penetrate that thick skull of his and make him realize that actions have consequences. He wanted to treat my yard like his personal dump? Fine, I was going to show him what that felt like. But I was going to do it smart. I was going to do it in a way that he could never come back from, never deny, never spin into making me look like the bad guy. I had cameras, I had documentation, I had 13 days worth of evidence sitting in my garage, fermenting in the heat, getting riper by the hour. And I had a plan. If you have ever dealt with a neighbor who made your life miserable, who pushed you past every reasonable limit, who made you question whether you were the crazy one for expecting basic human decency, then you know exactly what I was feeling in that moment. If you have ever stood in your own yard, on property you pay a mortgage on every single month, and felt like a stranger in your own life because of someone else's complete disregard for the people around them, then this story is for you. And if you want to hear how I finally gave Rick exactly what he deserved, hit that subscribe button right now because this one is going to be satisfying. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Marcus, and I have been a landscaper for 15 years. Started right out of high school, worked my way up from pushing a lawnmower for $8 an hour to running my own crew of 5 guys servicing residential and commercial properties across the northern suburbs of Dallas. I am 37 years old, married to my wife Janelle for 9 years, and we have 2 kids, Darius, who is 7, and Maya, who just turned 5. We bought our house in Cedar Ridge 6 years ago, back when the neighborhood was still mostly empty lots and the prices had not gone completely insane. It's a nice neighborhood. Was a nice neighborhood, the kind of place where people wave at each other when they pull into their driveways, where kids ride bikes in the cul-de-sac until the streetlights come on, where folks actually take pride in how their properties look.
That last part matters to me more than most people would understand. When you spend your days making other people's yards beautiful, when you sweat through your clothes every single day of the summer, shaping hedges and laying sod and planting flowers that will bloom in colors that make people stop their cars just to look, you develop a relationship with the land. You understand what it takes to make something grow, to keep something healthy, to maintain order against the constant chaos of nature trying to reclaim everything you build. My yard was perfect. Not bragging, just stating facts. Bermuda grass so thick and green it looked like a carpet. Boxwood hedges trimmed sharp enough to cut paper. A Japanese maple in the front corner that I planted the week we moved in, now tall enough to shade the kids' bedroom window. Flower beds that changed with the seasons. Tulips in spring, marigolds in summer, chrysanthemums in fall. Even in winter, I kept the structure clean, the beds mulched, the edges crisp. My house was the one people drove by slowly, the one the HOA used in their promotional materials when they were trying to attract new buyers to the development. I put that work in because I loved it, but also because I understood something that a lot of people do not think about. Your property is not just where you live. It is your investment. It is your equity. It is the single largest financial asset most people will ever own, and its value is directly tied to the neighborhood around it. One bad house on a street can drag down property values for everyone within sight of it. I knew this because I had seen it happen. Back when I was still working for somebody else, we had a client in Plano who sold her house for $40,000 less than her neighbor because the house 2 doors down had a yard full of dead grass, broken toys, and a boat that had not seen water since the Clinton administration. That was the house Rick bought. He moved in on a Thursday in late February. I remember because I was working from home that day, catching up on invoicing, and I heard the moving truck pull up around noon. I went outside to introduce myself, the way you do when you live in a neighborhood like Cedar Ridge, where being friendly is not just polite but expected. Rick was maybe 45, 46, stocky build, shaved head, arms covered in faded tattoos that looked like they had been done in somebody's garage. He was standing in the driveway smoking a cigarette while two guys who looked like they would rather be anywhere else hauled furniture off the truck. I walked over, extended my hand, told him my name and that I lived next door. "Welcome to the neighborhood. Let me know if you need anything." The usual script. He looked at my hand like I was offering him a dead fish, took a drag from his cigarette, blew the smoke in my general direction and said, "Yeah, thanks." Then he turned back to watch the movers. I am not a guy who needs everyone to like me. 15 years of working with homeowners has taught me that some people are just difficult, and the best thing you can do is stay professional and keep your distance. So I wrote off Rick's attitude as moving day stress, went back inside, and figured we would have a fresh start once he got settled. The fresh start never came. Within 2 weeks, Rick's yard looked like a foreclosure, and I do not mean messy.
I mean actively, aggressively abandoned. He had furniture on the lawn, not patio furniture, living room furniture. A couch with the cushions torn up, an entertainment center lying on its side, a mattress leaned against the fence. He had trash bags piled by the garage, not for pickup, just sitting there. He had car parts scattered across the driveway, an engine block, tires, something that might have been a transmission sitting in an oil stain the size of a dinner table. And then there was the Camaro. Rick's pride and joy. A 1969 Chevrolet Camaro SS, dark blue with white racing stripes, the only thing on his property that showed any evidence of care. He washed it every Sunday, waxed it once a month, covered it with a custom car cover every single night. He would sit in his driveway drinking beer and just looking at it, running his hand along the fender like it was something holy. Everything else on his property could rot, but not that Camaro. I watched all of this happen from my living room window, the same window where Janelle and I used to sit in the evenings and enjoy the view of our street. Now we kept the blinds closed on that side because looking at Rick's property made both of us angry in a way that we could not seem to shake. If you are watching from somewhere with your own HOA nightmare, drop a comment and tell me what state you are in. I am genuinely curious how many of us are dealing with this exact same situation, because based on the number of stories I have heard since all this went down, it feels like an epidemic. For the first couple months, I kept my distance. Janelle told me to let it go, that some people just live differently, that it was not our business how Rick kept his property. She was right. Technically, his yard was his yard. The HOA would deal with it eventually. Code enforcement would catch up. These things work themselves out. Except they did not. The HOA sent letters. I know because I was at the board meeting when they voted to send them. I had joined the board 2 years earlier, mostly to have a voice in decisions that affected our property values, and partly because nobody else wanted to do it. We sent Rick 3 letters over the course of 2 months. Certified mail, return receipt requested. He never responded, never opened them as far as we could tell. The violations kept piling up. Grass over 8 inches, visible trash, vehicles on cinder blocks, broken fence sections. It was like he was running through a checklist of everything you could possibly do wrong as a homeowner. But none of that was my breaking point. None of that pushed me to the edge. That was Rick's mess, on Rick's property, and as much as it killed me to look at it every day, I could compartmentalize. I could remind myself that the slow machinery of HOA enforcement would eventually catch up to him. I could focus on my own yard, my own family, my own life. Then his trash became my problem. It started small, the way these things always do. A fast food bag blowing across the property line, a soda can rolling into my flower bed. The kind of stuff that happens in any neighborhood, the kind of stuff you pick up without thinking about it, because maintaining good relationships with your neighbors matters more than being right about who left what where. I picked it up, threw it away, did not say anything. Then it got worse. Rick's trash routine was completely unpredictable.
Our pickup day was Thursday. Everyone in Cedar Ridge knew this. The trucks came between 7 and 9 in the morning, and you were supposed to have your bins at the curb by 6 a.m. and back in your garage by 6 p.m. Simple system. Works great when people follow it. Rick put his trash out whenever he felt like it. Monday, Wednesday, Saturday at 2 in the morning. He would drag bags to the curb, sometimes without even putting them in bins, and leave them there for days. When the wind kicked up, which happened constantly out here in the flat, open suburbs of North Texas, those bags would tear open. The contents would spread across the street, into the yards, into the storm drains. Most of it ended up on my property. I talked to him in early April, about 6 weeks after he moved in. Caught him in his driveway working on the Camaro one Saturday afternoon and walked over. Kept my voice friendly, my posture open, everything I had learned about de-escalating tense situations with difficult clients over 15 years of working in service. "Hey man," I said, "quick thing. Trash day is Thursday. You have been putting it out on Saturday and the wind has been blowing it around." He did not look up from the engine. "Yeah, I forget sometimes." "Well, it is ending up in my yard, pretty regularly now." That got him to look at me. He had a rag in his hand, black with grease, and he wiped his fingers slowly while he stared at me with an expression I can only describe as deliberately blank. "Wind blows, man. Nature." I let that sit there for a second, waiting to see if he would realize how ridiculous he sounded. He did not. "I am just asking you to put it out on the right day," I said, "in bins, that is all." "Sure thing, neighbor." He said that last word like it was an insult. I walked away, told myself it would get better. It did not. If this is already making you frustrated just hearing about it, imagine living it. Smash that like button if you think basic respect for your neighbors should not be this hard to come by. The trash situation escalated over the next 2 months. June and July were the worst. The heat made everything decompose faster, made the smells travel farther, made every piece of garbage feel like a personal attack. I was picking up Rick's debris from my yard 3, 4, 5 times a week. Food wrappers, beer bottles, used paper plates with dried ketchup and mustard that attracted flies by the hundreds, broken glass from liquor bottles that I found with my bare hands while weeding the flower beds. I talked to him again in mid-June. Same friendly approach, same reasonable request, same result. "It is still happening," I said. "Your trash, my yard, every week." He shrugged. "Cannot control the wind, Marcus." The way he said my name made it clear he remembered our first conversation and did not care. "Maybe you could weigh down your bags, or put them in cans." He tilted his head like I had just suggested something absurd. "That is a lot of work, man. So is picking up your garbage 3 times a week. Then stop picking it up." He turned and walked into his house. Conversation over. I told Janelle about it that night, after the kids were in bed. We sat in the living room with the blinds still closed on Rick's side of the house, drinking wine and trying to figure out what to do. She worked as a paralegal for a mid-sized firm downtown, and she knew enough about property law to understand our options.
"You can file a complaint with code enforcement," she said, "but it takes forever. Already did that through the HOA. Then you wait. Eventually, they will fine him enough that he has to comply." How long is eventually? She did not have an answer for that. The thing about being pushed past your limits is that it does not happen all at once. It is not one big moment where you snap. It is 100 small moments, 1,000 tiny indignities, the constant drip, drip, drip of someone treating you like you do not matter until one day you realize the bucket is overflowing and you cannot hold anymore. For me, that day came in the 3rd week of July. It was a Thursday morning, actual trash day. I was backing out of my driveway at 5:45, heading to a commercial job on the other side of town when I saw Rick walking across my yard. Not near my yard, on my yard, on my grass, the Bermuda that I had babied through 2 scorching summers, carrying a full black trash bag in each hand. I stopped the truck, watched through the windshield as he walked to the back corner of my property to the area behind my shed where there is a small gap between my fence and the neighbors on the other side, and threw both bags over the fence, into my yard. Then he turned around and walked back to his house like it was nothing.
I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Part of me wanted to get out of the truck and confront him right there. Part of me knew that if I did that in the state I was in, it would not end well. I drove to work, spent the whole day thinking about it, played it over and over in my head while I edged walkways and pulled weeds and pretended to be present for my crew when every cell in my body was back on my front lawn watching Rick dump his garbage on my property. That evening, I confronted him. He was in his driveway again, same spot, same beer in his hand, same look on his face like the world existed solely for his convenience. "I saw you this morning," I said, "walking across my yard, throwing trash bags behind my shed." He took a sip of his beer, took his time, said, "I do not know what you are talking about." "I literally just watched you do it." Prove it. That phrase, prove it. 2 words that changed everything. Because they told me exactly who I was dealing with. Not someone who didn't know any better. Not someone who was going through a hard time and letting things slide. Someone who knew exactly what he was doing and genuinely believed there would be no consequences. So I decided to give him consequences. What would you have done in my situation? Seriously, drop your thoughts in the comments. Because at this point, I had tried talking to him 3 times, filed complaints with the HOA, reported violations to code enforcement, and nothing had worked. I was out of civilized options. But I had cameras. Or rather, I was about to. That weekend, I spent $643 at Home Depot. 4 Wise cameras with night vision, a weatherproof mounting system, a dedicated storage drive, and enough cable to wire everything directly to my home network. Janelle raised an eyebrow when she saw the receipt, but she did not argue. She had seen the bags behind the shed. She knew what Rick was doing. I spent Sunday installing everything. 1 camera on the front of the house covering the driveway and street,
1 on the back corner of the garage covering the north side of the property, 1 on the shed covering the backyard, and 1 hidden in the eaves right above my office window, angled specifically to capture the property line between my yard and Rick's. By Sunday night, I had complete coverage, 360 degrees, motion-activated recording, timestamps on everything, automatic upload to cloud backup, so even if something happened to the physical hardware, the footage would be preserved. Monday morning, I went to work like normal. Checked the app on my phone during my lunch break. Rick had been in my yard twice. Once at 8:47 a.m., once at 11:13 a.m. Both times caught on crystal clear video. Both times carrying trash bags. Both times throwing them over my back fence. I showed Janelle that night. She watched the footage without saying anything for a long moment, then looked at me and said, "What are you going to do?" I am going to get more. Why? Because 1 day of footage is not enough. If I confront him now, he will call me crazy again, say the video is doctored, make himself the victim somehow. I need a pattern. I need it to be undeniable. I need so much evidence that there is no way he can spin this. She nodded slowly. Just be careful. I am always careful. That was not entirely true. I was careful about some things. Other things, I was planning to be very, very deliberate. Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything. I created a folder on my computer labeled simply Rick, and inside I organized subfolders by date. Every time my cameras caught him crossing onto my property, I saved the clip, noted the timestamp, and took a screenshot. Every time I found trash in my yard, I photographed it where it lay, then collected it in a labeled bag with the date written in permanent marker. By August 1st, I had 34 video clips, over 200 photos, and 13 bags of garbage stored in my garage. Janelle stopped going in there because of the smell. The kids were not allowed anywhere near it. My garage, which I usually kept as organized as my yard, looked like a crime scene evidence locker. Which, in a way, it was.
On August 3rd, a Tuesday, I decided it was time to confront Rick again, but this time I had ammunition. I waited until he was in his driveway, caught him just as the sun was going down, that golden hour light making everything look somehow prettier even though his yard was still a disaster. I walked over with my phone in my hand, the screen already loaded with a compilation video I had put together. 3 minutes of footage, chronological, showing Rick crossing my property line again and again and again. I held it up so he could see. "You have been in my yard 41 times in the past 2 weeks," I said. "I have every single instance on video, time-stamped, backed up to the cloud." He watched the screen for maybe 10 seconds. His expression did not change. When the compilation ended, he looked at me and said, "So call the cops. They are not going to do anything about some trash." The casual dismissal in his voice made something shift inside me. Some last thread of hope that this could be resolved through normal channels, that Rick might see the evidence and realize he was wrong, that basic human decency might eventually win out. That thread snapped. "You are probably right," I said, "but I am not calling the cops."
"What are you going to do then?" I smiled. Not a nice smile, not a friendly neighbor smile, something else. "I am going to handle it myself." He laughed. "Good luck with that." I walked away, went inside, sat down at my kitchen table while Janelle put the kids to bed, and I started planning. The next day, I made some calls, first to my buddy Derek, who works as a property manager for a commercial real estate company and knows more about local ordinances than anyone I have ever met. I asked him about my legal options. "You can sue him in small claims court," Derek said. "Dumping on someone else's property is technically illegal disposal of waste. But it is going to cost you time and money, and even if you win, you are probably only getting a few $100. What about code enforcement? They will eventually get around to it, but Rick sounds like the type who will just pay the fines and keep doing what he's doing. Some people just do not care. What if I returned his property to him?" There was a pause on the line. Returned it how? I told him what I was thinking. He was quiet for a long moment, then said, "I cannot tell you that is a good idea, but I cannot tell you it is illegal either. As long as you are not destroying his property, technically you are just returning lost items. Even if I return them creatively?" Derek laughed. "I did not hear you say that." My second call was to Janelle. I told her the plan, all of it. She listened without interrupting, which is how I knew she was taking it seriously. When I finished, she said, "You are sure about this?" I have never been more sure about anything. Another long pause. Then, "All right, but we need to make sure it cannot come back on us. That is why I am being careful." Careful how? I told her. The cameras, the documentation, the time-stamped footage proving that every single piece of trash in my garage came from Rick's illegal dumping. The cloud backups that could not be erased, the log I had been keeping with dates, times, and descriptions of every incident. If he tries to say I did something wrong, I said, I have 13 days of evidence showing he did something wrong first. I am just returning his belongings. Janelle was quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was harder than I had ever heard it. Make sure he knows that. Make sure he understands exactly what he did to deserve this. I will. To everyone out there dealing with a difficult neighbor right now, you are not alone. Sometimes the system fails us. Sometimes the people who are supposed to help just cannot. And sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands. If you have ever been there, let me know in the comments. I spent the next week waiting, watching, learning Rick's schedule. He worked at an auto body shop about 20 minutes from the neighborhood, left every morning at 6:30, came home around 5:30 most days, except Wednesdays. On Wednesdays, he left at 6 and did not come home until close to 8. Some kind of extended shift, or maybe a side job. I never figured out which. I started planning for a Wednesday. The second week of August, I finalized everything. Janelle took the kids to her mother's house for the day, gave me a kiss before she left, and told me to be careful. Again,
Always, I said. I watched Rick leave at 6:04 that morning, watched his truck pull out of the driveway, turned left at the end of the street, and disappear toward the main road. Then I waited. 30 minutes, just to be safe. At 6:37, I began. The first thing I did was put on gloves. Thick rubber gish gloves, the kind you use for serious cleaning, because what I was about to handle had been fermenting in my garage for 2 weeks, and the smell alone could knock you sideways. Then I went to the garage, opened the door, and started loading bags into my wheelbarrow. The smell hit me like a physical force. 2 weeks of Texas summer heat working on chicken bones, shrimp shells, old milk, rotting produce, and whatever else Rick had been consuming. I nearly gagged, pulled my shirt up over my nose, and kept working. It took 4 trips to move everything from my garage to Rick's driveway. By the time I was done, I had 13 bags of garbage, plus loose debris I had collected separately, all piled next to his precious Camaro. Then came the fun part. Rick never locked his car. I knew this because I had watched him for weeks, watched him walk away from the Camaro every night after covering it, never once reaching for keys or clicking a fob. Maybe he figured the cover was enough protection. Maybe he thought no one in a nice neighborhood like Cedar Ridge would ever touch his baby. He thought wrong. I pulled the cover off carefully, folded it neatly, set it aside. The Camaro gleamed in the early morning light. Blue paint perfect, chrome spotless, interior immaculate, black leather seats that Rick clearly conditioned regularly. I almost felt bad. Almost. The first bag I opened was from July 23rd. I remembered that one specifically because it was the day I found broken glass in my flower bed, the day I cut my palm pulling weeds and had to get 3 stitches at the urgent care clinic. That bag had been particularly ripe. Fast food containers covered in mold, beer bottles with the dregs still sloshing around inside, something wrapped in aluminum foil that I did not want to identify. I dumped it in the front seat. The second bag was from July 25th. More of the same, plus something that might have been fish at some point, now transformed into a biological slurry that clung to the leather like glue. Third bag, fourth, fifth. I worked methodically, distributing the contents evenly between front seat, back seat, and trunk. The trunk was a revelation. Rick had it stuffed with car show trophies, probably 30 of them, little gold figures on fake marble bases. I buried them in garbage. Let him dig through weeks of rot to find his precious prizes. By the time I finished, the Camaro was full. Not just a little full, packed. Garbage piled up to the windows, spilling over the dashboard, ground into the carpet, soaking into every surface. The smell was indescribable. Not just bad, weaponized. The kind of smell that would linger for weeks, maybe months, no matter how much Rick cleaned. I left the windows cracked, just an inch or 2 on each side, enough to let the Texas heat in, let the fermentation continue, let the smell really set in. Then I wrote the note. I had thought about what to say for days, wanted it to be perfect, something that made the message clear without admitting anything that could be used against me, something that would hit Rick right where it hurt. In the end, I kept it simple. Wrote it on a plain index card in block letters. You dropped this. Thought you would want it back. Cameras are still recording. I taped it to the windshield right at eye level, put the car cover back on carefully, exactly the way Rick had left it, collected my wheelbarrow and gloves, walked back to my house. By 7:43 a.m., I was inside, showered, and sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the security camera feed on my laptop, waiting. If you think I did the right thing, smash that like button. If you think I went too far, well, keep watching, because this story is not over yet. Rick got home at 7:58 p.m. that night. I was sitting in my living room, blinds open for the first time in months, watching his truck pull into the driveway. He parked next to the Camaro, got out, stretched, started walking toward his front door. Then he stopped. I watched him turn, sniff the air, turn again, walk slowly toward the Camaro. He pulled the cover off. Even from my window, 20 feet away and through glass, I could hear him scream. It was not a word, not language, just pure animal rage, a sound I did not think human beings were capable of making until I heard it coming out of Rick's mouth as he stared at what used to be his pristine, classic car. He started pulling garbage out with his bare hands, throwing it on the ground, gagging on the smell, screaming again. Then he saw the note. He read it again, looked up at my house, looked directly at the camera mounted on my eaves, the one he had apparently never noticed before. Then he came for me. I was ready, had been ready all day. When the pounding started on my front door, I was already standing in the foyer, phone in one hand, footage queued up in the other. I opened the door. Rick's face was purple, veins standing out on his forehead, hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was breathing so hard I thought he might pass out. "You," he said, "you did this. I am going to kill you." I held up my phone. On the screen, a video of Rick crossing my property line, throwing a trash bag over my fence. "I returned your property," I said. "Every piece of garbage you dumped on my lawn for the past 2 weeks, documented, time-stamped, backed up to cloud storage that cannot be erased. You want to call the cops? Go ahead, but I have 41 videos of you illegally dumping on my property. 41, plus photos, plus a log of every single incident going back to April." He stared at the phone, back at me, his fists unclenched slightly. "You cannot do this," he said. "This is destruction of property. That car is worth $60,000, and my property is worth $345,000. What do you think illegal dumping does to the value of a home?" He did not have an answer for that. I stepped closer, let him see my face, let him see that I was not afraid, not backing down, not going to be intimidated by his rage. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. "You are going to clean out your car, you are going to dispose of the garbage properly, and you are never going to set foot on my property again. Not to dump trash, not to walk across my lawn, not for any reason. If you do, I will take every piece of footage I have to the city, to the HOA, and to a lawyer. You will be dealing with fines, lawsuits, and code enforcement officers until you cannot afford to stay in this neighborhood anymore." His jaw worked. I could see him trying to find a comeback, trying to find some way to turn this around, make himself the victim. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. "You are going to clean out your car, you are going to dispose of the garbage properly, and you are never going to set foot on my property again. Not to dump trash, not to walk across my lawn, not for any reason. If you do, I will take every piece of footage I have to the city, to the HOA, and to a lawyer. You will be dealing with fines, lawsuits, and code enforcement officers until you cannot afford to stay in this neighborhood anymore." His jaw worked. I could see him trying to find a comeback, trying to find some way to turn this around, make himself the victim.
He could not. "This is not over," he said finally. "Yes, it is." I stepped back, closed the door, locked it, stood there in my foyer for maybe 5 minutes, waiting for my heart rate to come back down, waiting for the adrenaline to fade, waiting to see if he would try something else. He did not. Through the window, I watched him walk back to his driveway, stare at his garbage-filled Camaro for a long moment, then start to clean up. It took him 3 days. 3 days of hauling trash, hosing down leather, trying every cleaning product known to man to get the smell out of his car. I know because I watched, because my cameras were still recording, because I wanted documentation in case he decided to retaliate. He did not. Something changed in Rick after that night. Not a lot. He was still surly, still unfriendly, still the worst neighbor I had ever had in terms of how he kept his property. But he kept it to his property. The trash bags stopped appearing on my lawn. His garbage went to the curb on Thursday, in cans, properly sealed. He stopped walking across my yard entirely. The Camaro never fully recovered. A month later, he sold it. I saw the guy who bought it drive away, windows down, face wrinkled like he could still smell something wrong. Rick got maybe $20,000 for a car that had been worth triple that.
If you have ever had a moment where you finally stood up to someone who was making your life miserable, you know the feeling, that mix of satisfaction and exhaustion, triumph and relief. If you enjoyed this story, please hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. And if you have got your own nightmare neighbor experience, share it in the comments. I read every single one. 6 months after the Camaro incident, Rick put his house up for sale. I found out from the listing before I found out from him. Saw it pop up on Zillow when I was doing my regular check on property values in the neighborhood, a habit I had developed since the whole ordeal started. There it was, Rick's address, asking $295 for a house that had last sold for $260. He had cleaned up the yard for the listing photos. First time it had looked presentable since he moved in. Broken furniture gone, car parts gone. Grass cut, though not well, the kind of last-minute effort that real estate agents probably insist on before they will take a listing. It sold in 3 weeks for $278. I know because I looked up the transaction records at the county clerk's office. Some things you just want to verify for yourself. I was in my front yard the day Rick moved out. Not by coincidence. I wanted to see it. Wanted to watch him pack his things into a truck and drive away from the neighborhood he had made miserable for over a year. He saw me watching. Our eyes met across the property line for maybe 5 seconds. He did not. Neither did I. The new neighbors moved in 2 weeks later. Young couple, maybe late 20s, both working in tech downtown. They introduced themselves as Jordan and Megan and asked if I had any tips for lawn care in the Texas heat. We talked for 20 minutes about irrigation systems and soil composition. When they left, Megan said she could tell from my yard that I really knew what I was doing. I thanked her, told her I was in the business, offered to take a look at their property whenever they were ready. They took me up on it the following weekend.
I spent 3 hours walking their yard, explaining what Rick had neglected and what could be salvaged. They hired my crew to do the restoration. Took us 2 months of solid work to undo what Rick had done in a year and a half, but by the end of it, their property looked like it belonged in Cedar Ridge, like it belonged next to mine. Janelle and I have been back to enjoying our evening wine by the window, blinds open, view unobstructed. 2 houses on a quiet street in the suburbs of Dallas, both maintained by people who take pride in where they live. The kids play in Jordan and Megan's yard now sometimes. They got a golden retriever named Biscuit, and Darius is obsessed with him. I hear them laughing out there on weekend mornings while I am doing my own lawn work, and it reminds me why I fought so hard to protect what we have. Because this is not just a house. It is not just grass and hedges and flower beds. It is home. It is where my family lives, where my kids are growing up, where Janelle and I have built a life together. It is worth protecting. And sometimes, when the system fails you, you have to protect it yourself. I am not saying everyone should fill their neighbor's car with garbage. That was my situation, my solution, my risk to take. But I am saying that you do not have to accept being treated badly just because someone else does not care about the consequences of their actions. You have options. You have rights. You have the ability to document, to plan, to respond in ways that are proportional and effective and leave you with the high ground. Rick learned that lesson the hard way. I hope he took it with him wherever he moved. My cameras are still recording, by the way. Force a habit now. Every night I check the footage. Every morning I scan for anything unusual. Every time I see movement on my property line, I get a notification on my phone. Not because I am expecting trouble. Jordan and Megan are the best neighbors we have ever had. But because you never know when someone is going to test your boundaries. And when they do, I want to be ready. To everyone who stuck with me through this whole story, thank you. If you enjoyed it, if you were cheering me on, if you felt that satisfaction when Rick saw what I had done to his precious Camaro, please hit subscribe. Tell your friends. Share this video with anyone who has ever had a neighbor from hell. And if you have your own story, a neighbor who made your life miserable and how you dealt with it, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments, because we are all in this together. Neighborhoods, communities, people who just want to live in peace and take care of what is theirs. You deserve to feel safe where you live. You deserve neighbors who respect your property. You deserve better than people like Rick. And sometimes you have to be the one to make that happen. My name is Marcus. I am 37 years old, a landscaper, a husband, a father, and a guy who finally stood up to a bully. If you are dealing with your own Rick right now, hang in there. Your day is coming.